A couple of years ago, the city of Cedar Falls received a $6.7 million grant from Iowa's flood mitigation program to increase the height of the existing flood levee that stretches from the Ice House Museum to Western Home Communities, and the project is wrapping up. The 2-year mark of the 2016 flood recently passed, and even though that flood was not as big as 2008, it was big enough for the city to continue having conversations about protecting its citizens and increase the height of the mile-long flood levee wall an additional 2 feet.
So our levee's rated for a 500-year event, plus 2 additional feet of freeboard on top of that. To give you some perspective, the top of our new levee wall now is about 2.77 feet above what it was in 2008 flooding. So we've added that additional protection beyond what was there before. And then also from 2016, we're about 6 feet above that flooding event. So increased capacity vertically for flooding events.
This project was primarily funded by a grant that the city received from the Iowa Flood Mitigation Program.
So from the Iowa Flood Mitigation Board, we received $6.6 million to improve the levee segments through this. A lot of the costs of the levee and design are attributed to that funding source. So during the design process, we were working with a few different agencies, FEMA, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and DNR, just working out the logistics of obtaining a no-rise certificate, which means that we're adding to our levee and not creating a new levee segment that, the flood level and elevations with the no-rise wouldn't affect other parts of the community in flooding events. So in design of our levee system, we added 2 feet to our entire levee system, starting at the Ice House and wrapping its way around the Cedar River on the south side to Western Home Properties. It's over a mile long in length. We added 2 feet. That was done both with structural concrete wall and earthen levee segments. Around the Ice House, we originally had an earthen levee section that was right along the railroad. We have since added to that and then also added a structural concrete wall on top of that. Around the area behind me now, this is an area where existing wall was before, and we've just added to that wall just to increase the height by additional 2 feet. And then as we move to the south, on the south side of First, it's an earthen levee segment that goes around our wastewater plant. And then there's an additional structural wall around the plant, and then it goes back into earthen and into a structural wall over by Western Homes.
This flood levee has invisible walls associated with it.
The system has 3 invisible walls. The one behind me here is at Main Street and First. It has access for our trail segment. That was one design aesthetic. We wanted to keep that open during non-flood events so pedestrians and bicyclists don't have to go up and over the levee wall system. They can access it during non-flooding events and get down to the lower river area regions. We do have 2 other closures throughout town. We have a railroad closure located near 9th and Bluff. That closure remains open for rail car accessibility. But in the event of flooding, we can close that off, notify the railroad, close that off, and allow that to be secured. The 3rd closure is located on 9th Street over by Western Homes. It's a wall panel that allows you to access Washington Park. We like to keep that open, use the park as much as we can. So during flooding events, the park will be closed and then we close the closure up. So the invisible walls are determined to go in based on flood predictions by the U.S. Army Corps and the National Weather Service that's given to us. It indicates what the predicted flood elevation will be. If there's any chance that we feel it's going to breach the lower part of this section, we'll install it ahead of time, have Public Works on staff 24/7 if we need to install that. Those elevations, we do monitor also upstream, so our watershed does go into southern Minnesota. We monitor that upstream between here and in southern Minnesota all the way out to parts of Mason City also. So just looking at their precipitation, looking at what they have coming downstream and just taking a look, making sure we're protected.
The majority of the levee wall runs along First Street, and since the additional 2 feet was being added, the city also decided to improve the looks of the structural wall, like adding new paint and other visual qualities.
So during design, we wanted to incorporate some design aesthetics from a wall imprint pattern on the concrete wall behind me, but then also include some levee lights to match into both around the Ice House and then Peter Melody Park, and working with kind of the downtown aesthetic design changes will be coming over the next few years, and just incorporating that with Peter Melody Park that we're restoring right now.
Matt informed me that the Peter Melody Park at the corner of First and Main Street is getting an upgrade, and the city will be adding a concrete sidewalk, brick pavers to certain areas of the park, a walking path, and seating will be added to the park. The Gateway to the Trails art sculpture is back, and this new renovation will increase the visibility of downtown as a gateway feature into the city.